Lokki here. I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about defense with the glaive, particularly against sword and shield. Before I get too far into that, I want to talk about some footwork and what it means to be on the balls of your feet. And the way I explain it to newer fighters who don't quite understand or grasp the concept yet is I get them to stand upright, feet shoulder width apart, in a bit of a square stance. Your feet are actually underneath your shoulders. And then I have them bend their knees a little bit, and then start to slowly shift their weight forward until the heels in their shoes, or if you're barefoot, your heel on the ground starts to just barely lift off the ground, or is only just touching. And there's no weight on your heel anymore. You can feel that now transition into the front of your feet, and you can feel your core start to engage while your knees are bent. And this is what it means, and this is what it should feel like to be on the balls of your feet. This allows you to respond and move quicker. If you're flat-footed, you have to shift your weight forward in order to start walking, because walking is effectively a controlled fall. But when you're on the balls of your feet, you're actually doing that controlled fall, and you're allowed to actually quickly just continue leaning. And you bring your foot out that didn't stop you, and you can immediately go and change direction with this. If you're flat-footed, you then have to change direction. You have to lift up and then go. Whereas when you're on the balls of your feet, you can immediately just start moving and make turns and shift your body weight, even with just repositioning your feet. But this is not exactly a difficult movement when you're on the balls of your feet, and your entire core is engaged along with it. And the reason we want to do that, to be able to do and be in that position, is because in a close fighting game, we will be in a position a bit like this. You'll be in a much more vertical defense. You don't want to be too vertical, which is kind of easy to get into. However, if you're in this position, you have to retract. You can throw the strikes if you want to. The problem is it brings your elbows a bit further out, and it's not terrible to be into, but if you just think about your here rather than here, your arms are a little bit further out. Here they're a bit more natural. You can kind of get a natural roll onto your leg quite easily, and with a little bit of a roll defense, you can block that arm, and the other arm becomes exposed. If they start to shoot for that arm, you just roll back into there, or you can bring the bottom in to then make it now the stick is now completely defended it. So back to this position here, when we're lining up against our target here. On the balls of your feet, you can then easily just throw a quick, powerful strike with a little bit of practice. It's quite simple. And in this position, it's easy to do. If you're making a block out here in this position rather than in this position, when you want to throw that same strike, you're throwing from away from your body, and then you have to you can get the power, but you have to work harder to generate that, and it'll be a bit slower. Particularly if you have to throw and you want to strike on this side, you then have to recover the weapon and then throw off of here. Whereas if you're in this other position, you can easily strike with a lot more power and control. So essentially, imagine there's a box that you have, and this from your hips to your shoulders. If your gauntlets are always pretty much in that position, you can throw a strike much quicker and respond to countering someone else's blow with much more efficiency and effectiveness. So I go ahead and I see an attack coming at me. I can then either step forward to bring the weapon in between me and the attack, or I can step backwards and do the exact same thing. But because I haven't brought the weapon across to make that block, I've rolled my body and repositioned myself. I can then throw a strike immediately after. Same thing to the other side. I can make that block, boom, ready to go. And I can respond in kind with a quick cut. And ideally, it's as you make that step, you could throw that strike and block if they're aiming for your head. So what it should look like is a bit like this. Step and making the block. Making the block against the head. So, or stepping in, making that block. So that allows us to counter punch. Similarly, if there's a great weapon, against another great weapon, you're generally going to be locked in combat in a bit of a pushing and pulling match. And there's a lot more to that than I'm ready to explain at this point. But against a longer range weapon, where if you're swinging at this mid-range that we like to be in, if you step and throw, you'll actually get around their defense by changing the angle and stepping off line. And this will get you a deeper cut as well. Plus, this brings, if they're attacking down this way, you get to slide off line so you're a more difficult target. Plus, you'll be able to have your weapon in between yours and theirs, because this will be coming in at an angle and not generally coming straight down at you. So, boom, and then a slight roll and a small duck will generally block any eye attack. Generally, most glaive, most great weapons will not throw for their legs unless they can get the hip, because generally you're trading a leg shot for a kill shot, because it's difficult to block your head when you're throwing for a low blow. Like so. You can throw, but as you can see, this plane, they can swing down below, either hit you in the arm, or if they pull the shot a little bit, they'll hit you straight in the body, and you've only gotten the leg. Your best bet, especially when you're fighting sword and shield fighters, is to maintain range. This distance, the space between you, is actually your first line of defense. Now, to maintain this, again, back to our footwork, being in a bit of a square stance or in a 1 foot forward, other foot kind of lunging position for your thrusts, you can try to maintain it. Maintain your distance with your weapon. If you strike your opponent's center mass, you can control them by pushing them away and pushing yourself away at the same time, creating more space. This can be used to slow down your opponent. It can be risky if you overcommit and you miss your target. But if you throw for a safe spot where you are unlikely to miss, you can create space between you and them and try to maintain the distance, which is your first line of defense. Likewise, you can throw a cut at them. Don't aim for an area where they could duck under it. Aim for an area they have to block, and strike at them. And then after the strike, push off. You can push them away with your strike, or after you land, you can push yourself back if they resist substantially. Those two things can be really useful for trying to maintain that space when your opponent is rushing at you. Because when you strike at them, and if they're coming at you, you can push them to clear them away in one direction, and you can clear yourself in another direction, and you're back to being able to then maintain your space and get a few more shots in before they have a chance to close again. Other things that we like to do with our space is with proper footwork. You want to be able to, shift around your target, never crossing your legs. If you cross your legs, you can't advance forward or backward. You can only continue kind of sideward motion, and your opponent can read that. And they'll do that by watching you as you move around. So always bring your feet closer together into a position where you can then move out. When I was doing judo, we would do a lot of drills where you're constantly moving this in a circle, as well as in wrestling. So never crossing your feet. Being on the balls of your feet allows you to then be very mobile and able to move forward or back at will with less effort. And that allows you to keep your distance by being in that mobile, athletic stance, body and chest a bit further up, slightly a little bit more knees than bent, more almost not quite a squat, but say maybe like a 120-degree angle for your legs. So in that position on the balls of your feet, you can then move around past your opponent if they charge at you. Another useful thing to do is backpedaling. Backpedaling is explained really well with Sir Branos, Duke Branos, where he talks about creating tension by having distance between your opponent and then moving backwards. As they go to advance, you can choose to change the range and catch them off guard. So one thing you can do is you are in your athletic stance, pop yourself into a bit more of a squat, and then immediately push back with your feet, just shuffling and pushing off your toes. So what it ends up looking like is moving back, and then by learning how to have more of a spatial awareness about where you are in the air in the tournament, or when there's trees and stuff around, try to create an idea of what it is to be that is the space around you. So ideally, you can then start backpedaling in a controlled movement, and then when the time is right, you can backpedal away, step offline, and strike as your opponent moves past you. And so the other side, it looks pushing off that foot and pivoting on the one and throwing the cut as they go by. And that allows you to get around their defense without having to do any effort. Your opponent's inertia basically kills them. Other technique while we're in that position is when you make your blocks, you learn to strike with them. Essentially, every block should be a cut, and every cut should be a block. All right. So when my opponent attacks me, I make my block and I strike at them. They come and they strike at me on this side, make my block, and I strike at them. You can also potentially cut their arm, or if you can also create your space and strike the leg. The attack will go past you. When you have practice of reading the ranges and getting an idea for what kind of strikes you need to step further out, or you need to make that tight block and then step in and attack. Sometimes it's preferable to change that angle and make that cut, rather than, instead of stepping forward, stepping away and cutting. It really depends on how they're attacking and what kind of momentum the two of you have in the fight. But doing the Pell drill, it's good to practice when you're making the move to always take a step in some direction, just so that you become well versed, and it builds up the muscle memory of actually, moving around the target and making all of those strikes while you're dodging their attacks. And all of that is achieved by being in that ready stance. You can be a little bit more of a less choked up or more choked up. This concept is still the same. You want to keep your gauntlets in your center, and you move your body so that you're now making those blocks. And every single time, little steps are fantastic for this. It's small adjustments, because the bigger step you are, the more you've committed and the less options you have available to you. So it's always best to then move yourself into a position where you're able to throw a strike after you've made that block, or even better, step out of the way and make that cut. And ideally, when you're in that mid-range, those are the perfect opportunities for counters like that. So I think I'll gone over that a bit enough. I'd like to try to put in a few more advanced tips and tricks for glaive fighting versus sword and shields. Defenses for other pole arms is quite different, because there's lots of more thrusts and you're always within each other's range, generally speaking. So there's much more of a linear fight that is going on, rather than this dynamic stepping around. But still, even while you're fighting against other glaives or other great weapons that have a lot of range, it's still my preference to go ahead and actually take a step with my movement in order to avoid an attack. I prefer to do that than to actually give a hard block. I would love to always be in an opportunity where I can manipulate my opponent's inertia and momentum against them. So, but that's enough for now. So, till the next one. Thank you.